Hey guys, tonight we wander beyond cities and clocks, stepping into a world where wisdom isn't written in books, but blown through bone flutes and braided into feathers. The stars above us aren't just pretty, they're ancestors watching. The fire before us doesn't just warm our skin, it listens. That sound, a drum, beating like a second heart. We're going deep into shamanic wisdom tonight, into the smoke, into the dark, into the songs that called spirits from caves and clouds. And if you're thinking, this sounds a bit intense, well, you probably won't survive this. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. So here I am sitting in a low-smoke hut built of bark and breath. It's not a replica. It's not a simulation. It's real. The floor is dirt, still warm from the day. The walls hum with the low rattle of a drum, slow and steady. Someone, maybe the shaman, has crushed herbs over the coals. And now the air is thick with the scent of mugwort, pine resin, and something I can't name, but makes my skin feel like it remembers a dream I've never had. The shaman doesn't speak at first. He sings. Or maybe it's a chant, or a kind of talking that doesn't care if you understand. His eyes are closed, but his body moves like it knows what to do. I watch his hands move through the smoke, drawing shapes, circles, spirals, lines. One moment he's whispering to the ground. The next he's whistling to the rafters. And everyone here, even the tourists in yoga pants, are dead quiet. There's something in the air. It's not just smoke, it's presence. What we now call shamanism spans cultures, continents, and thousands of years. But it's never quite belonged to just one people. The Evenki of Siberia are credited with giving us the word shaman through Russian colonial translation. But the practice? It exists everywhere, from the Sami in Scandinavia, to the Shipibo in the Amazon, to the Dogon in Mali. Each culture had its own word, its own way of doing things. But the core idea was the same: a person who could cross boundaries. Someone who knew how to walk between worlds. Historians still argue whether shamans were born or made. Some say they were chosen after surviving a great illness or a lightning strike. Others say they were trained from childhood, taught how to listen to stones and stars. Some even say the role passed through bloodlines, like a family heirloom no one could sell. But here's the wildest part. Many shamanic cultures believe that illness wasn't just physical, it was spiritual. That the soul could wander away, get stuck somewhere, get stolen. And that healing wasn't just about mending tissue. It was about calling the soul back. Imagine that. Therapy not through talking, but through drumming your soul home. In Mongolia, shamans used horsehair drums to call spirits of sky and ancestor. In Peru, it was ayahuasca and Icaros, songs taught by the plants themselves. In North America, the Lakota practiced the Yuwipi ceremony, where the healer was tied up in a dark room and spirits would untie the knots, or not. The tools varied, but the goal was always the same: pierce the veil, bring back guidance, restore harmony. I remember one story I heard from a Sami elder. He said his grandfather once healed a child who'd been in a coma, not with medicine, but by walking the wind to find the child's missing soul. He brought it back wrapped in a dream. The next day, the child woke up. Was it real? Was it placebo? Or was it simply the kind of medicine we forgot how to measure? A fringe anthropologist once claimed that shamans weren't just early doctors or priests, but early psychonauts. That their techniques, breathwork, chanting, isolation, rhythmic stimulation, were all tools to alter consciousness and travel inward. Not to escape reality, but to see more of it, to touch something deeper. And whether that's the spirit world or the subconscious, who's to say? The fire in the hut snaps loudly, and everyone jumps just a little. The shaman laughs, not mockingly, but like the fire just told a good joke. He turns to the west and waves smoke toward it. Someone says it's the direction of endings, of ancestors, of bones. And suddenly I'm not just watching, I'm participating. I'm breathing deeper. My shoulders are soft. My hands are warm. The drum doesn't sound like it's outside me anymore. It's in my chest. There's no sermon, no clear lesson, just presence, and maybe that's the point. That wisdom isn't something you hear or read, it's something you remember. Like how your feet know how to walk, even if you've never been to this path before. When the ritual ends, the shaman thanks the spirits. He blows into a feather and places it gently in a bowl of water. Then he looks at each of us, not smiling, not serious, just looking, as if asking, "Did you hear them too?" And I think I did. There's something about the drum that follows you. Long after the fire's gone out, long after you've shaken the pine needles from your shoes and returned to whatever city you call home, you'll be brushing your teeth or waiting in line for coffee, and suddenly you hear it again. Not with your ears, but somewhere else. It's not noise, it's a rhythm inside you, a memory older than language. And that's the thing about shamanic wisdom. It doesn't just teach, it lingers. I once found myself in the Amazon rainforest, not for some ayahuasca retreat, but because I got lost looking for a butterfly research station. True story. I ended up stumbling into a small village just as the sun dipped low, staining the treetops with gold. And there, under a thatched roof, an elder woman sat surrounded by bowls of leaves. She wasn't a tourist attraction. She wasn't advertised. She was just there. She looked at me, not unkindly, and said something in Shipibo I couldn't understand. But then she handed me a cup of tea and laughed like I was the one who traveled through time. Later, I learned she was a curandera, a healer, not just of sickness, but of imbalance. In her world, plants weren't ingredients, they were teachers. Each leaf had a voice, a song, a story. The vine used in ayahuasca ceremonies, they call it the vine of the soul, not because it gives you visions, but because it untangles the knots you didn't know you tied. Now, I'm not here to glamorize psychedelics. That's a whole different conversation, and way more complex than some influencer's jungle vlog. But I will say this, for many indigenous shamans, these plants aren't trips, they're bridges to ancestors, to insight, to healing. The ceremonies are deeply structured with diets, prayers, taboos. They're not casual. They're sacred choreography between the human and the more than human. And it's not just South America. In the Arctic North, Inuit shamans practiced what some call soul flight. They'd enter trances, sometimes through drumming, sometimes through sensory deprivation, and claimed to visit realms where they could speak to sea spirits, weather entities, or even the unborn. There are stories of shamans returning with names for children not yet conceived, or warnings of storms before a seal hunt. Again, are these literal, metaphorical, or just truths that don't care what we call them? Historians still argue whether these trance states were actual out-of-body experiences or metaphorical frameworks for intuition and empathy. Some psychologists compare them to deep flow states or even lucid dreaming. But here's the wildest fringe theory I've heard, that shamans were early quantum thinkers, intuitively grasping the nonlinearity of time and the illusion of separation. That when a shaman says, "I am the river," they're not being poetic, they're being accurate. And this takes us to something deeper, what shamanic traditions actually believe about reality. In many of these cultures, the world isn't divided into material and spiritual. There's no clean split. Everything is alive. The mountain has a voice. The cave has memory. Even illness isn't some invader. It's a message, a call to listen, to realign. In West Africa, among the Dagara people, diviners use patterns in sand and cowrie shells to interpret the will of the ancestors. One man told me, "We don't believe the ancestors are gone. They just move behind the curtain, and when they speak, we listen with the whole body." That idea floored me. Not just that the dead aren't absent, but that wisdom is a relationship you tend. And speaking of relationships, one of the most important tools a shaman uses is not a drum or a rattle. It's listening. Deep, embodied, patient listening. To the land, to the wind, to silence. A Siberian shaman once told a researcher that he learned more from watching wolves than from any human. He said wolves understand territory, dreams, and family. That's a better curriculum than most PhDs. But let's get weird for a moment. There's a theory, very fringe but worth pondering, that some ancient cave paintings were not simply art or hunting magic, but the visual records of shamanic visions? Think about it, the spirals, the hybrid animal humans, the abstract symbols deep within caves that no sunlight ever touched. Maybe they weren't painting what they saw with eyes. Maybe they were painting what they saw with spirit. In the Chauvet cave in France, for example, there's a panel showing a cluster of animals in impossible combinations, overlapping rhinos, lions, and bison. One archaeologist suggested this represented not chaos, but layered consciousness, a vision stacked in meaning, like how in dreams, symbols carry multiple truths at once. And if you think that's a stretch, just remember, modern shamans are still working in urban Tokyo, in Nairobi, in New York. Some carry ancient lineages, some are reviving lost ones, some blend traditions with psychotherapy or music or even AI-generated sounds. And while purists might scoff, isn't that what shamans always did? Adapt, improvise, listen to the moment and shape it with spirit. There's one story I'll never forget. A young woman initiated in a remote Quechua village said her grandmother told her, "You don't have to know the names of the plants, just sit beside them until they sing." That line has haunted me ever since, because it implies that the world is not a textbook, it's a choir, and the job of the shaman is not to translate, but to tune in. The sun was setting when I left the Amazon village. The butterflies never did show up, but as I walked away, I realized something had shifted. Not dramatically, not even consciously, but the trees looked back at me. The wind whispered my name, and somewhere deep in the quietest part of myself, a drum kept beating. You ever wake up and just know something's off, even if nothing around you has changed? Like your body clock is still ticking, the coffee still brews, the news still screams, but there's a thread loose in the tapestry of the day. In the shamanic world, that's not a glitch. That's a signal, a tug from the invisible. One of the most quietly powerful shamanic principles is that of soul loss. Not in the doom and gloom, fire and brimstone kind of way. No demons dragging you anywhere. It's more like fragmentation, little pieces of yourself, your vitality, your clarity, your joy, getting left behind during trauma, heartbreak, or even slow, silent neglect. The shaman's job? To go find those pieces and bring them back. In many traditions, this is called soul retrieval. It sounds poetic, maybe even theatrical. But when you hear a Mongolian shaman describe journeying through 7 layers of clouded worlds to coax back a child's lost laughter, it stops sounding like metaphor. It sounds like care, radical, undivided, fierce care. There's a story from the Sami people of Northern Europe. A child stopped speaking after seeing her father killed in a reindeer accident. Weeks passed. Nothing. The village called in a Noaidi, one of their shamans. He didn't ask questions. He didn't touch the girl. He simply sang, joiked actually, a traditional song meant to summon the essence of a thing. He sang for her name, her smile, her dreams, and slowly her lips moved. She whispered, "You remembered me." Now, historians still argue whether such healings are psychosomatic responses or culturally conditioned placebo effects. And that's fair. But as one anthropologist noted, when a child speaks again, the debate becomes irrelevant. And here's where it gets even more curious. Some shamans say they don't just work with human souls, they work with places, rivers that have dried up, not from climate change, but from grief, forests that are quiet, not from logging, but from being forgotten. The ritual in these cases is not to restore nature to humans, but to restore humans to nature. Among the Andean Quero people, there's a ceremony called despacho, a kind of prayer bundle. You lay down leaves, sweets, seeds, feathers, each chosen with intention. It's not about the objects, it's about the balance, about reciprocity. The belief is, if you've taken something from the earth, you must give something back, even if it's just beauty, gratitude, or song. And the whisper underneath it all is, "We remember you." Fringe detail incoming. Some researchers propose that shamans act like quantum observers, that their attention, focused, reverent, undistracted, actually shifts reality at the smallest levels. They call this participatory consciousness. It's out there, sure, but it tracks with something ancient cultures have said all along. What you look at with love changes. Let's visit Australia now. Aboriginal shamans, known as clever men or clever women, work within the dream time, a concept both cosmology and narrative. Time isn't linear here. Events aren't events. They're echoes of ancestral actions still unfolding. One elder explained it like this: when we dance the kangaroo hunt, we're not pretending. We're becoming the first hunters again, and they become us. That's not a metaphor. That's a metaphysics. In these ceremonies, songs are maps, symbols are coordinates. And the land itself is a library of stories, written in stone, in shadow, in water flow. Lose the story, and you lose the place. Restore the song, and you restore the world. And this brings me to one of the quietest tools in the shaman's kit, the power of naming. Not assigning labels, but calling forth essence. In Zulu traditions, a healer might greet you not with "what's wrong," but "who are you today?" Because illness may not come from a virus. It may come from forgetting your role in the web. Here's a quirky but profound tidbit. In some Peruvian villages, shamans won't use certain plant names unless the plant agrees. They'll sing around it, sleep beside it, dream with it. Only then, if the plant responds in vision or scent, will they speak its name aloud. Imagine that level of consent, that level of listening. And don't get me wrong, it's not all firelight and feathers. Some shamanic journeys are grueling. They involve fasting, cold, isolation, not as punishment, but purification. A kind of intentional vulnerability that clears the static so truth can come through. One Greenlandic Ngakuk described entering a cave for 3 days, blindfolded, just listening to the rocks. On the third night, he claimed a voice said, "There is nothing to learn, only to remember." When he left, he sang songs he'd never heard, but which the elders recognized. Now, do we take that literally? Who knows? But what if remembering is the true medicine? Not learning something new, but reawakening something old. Buried beneath capitalism, screens, and the buzz of too much everything. That's why many modern seekers turn to shamanic practices, not for spectacle, but for stillness, for reconnection, for the strange, sacred feeling that something larger than you sees you, knows your name, has not forgotten. I once asked a shaman, "How do you know if a healing worked?" He smiled and said, "When the birds returned to the window." I didn't understand it then, but I do now. Healing isn't always a light show. Sometimes it's just silence where there was noise, warmth where there was ice, a sigh, a tear, the breath coming easier. So tonight, if some part of you feels lost, scattered across calendars and obligations, imagine a gentle figure walking through your dreams, picking up the dropped threads, whispering, "I've got you." Because maybe the shaman isn't a person out there. Maybe it's the remembering inside you. Let me take you somewhere unexpected now. Not to a mountaintop, not into a rainforest, but to the kitchen table of a grandmother. A spoon in one hand, herbs in the other. She isn't dressed in feathers. She's not chanting. But what she's doing, that's shamanism too. Because at its heart, shamanic wisdom isn't about performance. It's about presence. The ability to see the sacred in the everyday, to make ritual out of routine, and the plants. We can't talk about shamanism without talking about the green allies. Ayahuasca, peyote, iboga, San Pedro, the list goes on. But these are not drugs, despite what some glossy magazine spreads might suggest. In the traditional context, these are teachers, with personalities, preferences, even tempers. Let's take ayahuasca, a thick, bitter brew made by combining two very specific Amazonian plants. One contains DMT, a powerful visionary compound. The other disables the enzyme that normally blocks DMT in the body. Here's the kicker. These two plants grow miles apart in the jungle, and there are hundreds of thousands of possible combinations. Yet indigenous shamans say the plants told them how to mix it. Historians and botanists still scratch their heads over this. How did they know? Trial and error? Or did that grandmother with the spoon know something modern science forgot how to ask? But don't get it twisted. These ceremonies are not Woodstock remixes. They're structured, sacred, and deeply communal. There's often vomiting, weeping, visions of death and rebirth, and always a guide, a curandero or vegetalista, who steers the ship. In Shipibo culture, the songs are maps. Literally. Called Icaros, these chants aren't sung from memory, they're received. Mid-ceremony, the shaman listens to the spirit of the plant, then sings what they hear. And the song doesn't just fill the air, it moves it, shapes it. I've heard one participant say the melody untied a knot in my chest I didn't know I had. Here's a fringe tidbit. Some scientists propose that psychedelics don't create hallucinations, they tune the brain into alternate channels like radio frequencies. In that case, what if the jaguar you saw was always there? But not all plant teachings require altered states. Sometimes the lesson is subtler. A dandelion pushing through concrete, a mint leaf on the tongue. In Celtic tradition, the hawthorn tree was considered a portal between worlds. To sit beneath it was to invite dreams that whispered things you needed to hear, not wanted, needed. And then there's tobacco, not the filtered kind on gas station shelves. Sacred tobacco, mapacho, used in rituals not to harm, but to cleanse, to connect. In many tribes, it's offered to the spirits before a journey, a way of saying, I come with humility. And the smoke itself? It's believed to carry prayers, visible breath reaching the invisible. Now let's zoom out for a second. Across the world, from the Arctic to the Andes, shamans report encountering the same structures in altered states: ladders, spirals, tunnels, birds, serpents. Historians still argue whether these are archetypal motifs encoded in the human psyche or evidence of some shared spiritual topology. Either way, it's worth noting. When people who've never met, who've never even seen the same books, describe the same dream architecture, you have to wonder. One anthropologist called it the sacred geography of the soul. I call it poetic GPS. But not all messages come in neon visions. Sometimes they come in silence. I once read about a shaman from the Siberian Evenki people who, after days of ceremony, simply walked outside and lay flat on the snow. When asked what he was doing, he replied, listening to the ice. Stillness is sacrament, cold is communion. And what about the animals? Shamans the world over speak of power animals, guides that walk beside us in spirit. You don't choose them, they choose you. Might be a bear, might be a hummingbird, might even be something odd, like a mole or eel. It's not about beauty or ferocity, it's about medicine. One healer told me, if you dream of snakes, don't panic. They're telling you it's time to shed. Even insects have wisdom. The Maya believed the bee was a messenger between worlds. Its dance, a form of cosmic language. In fact, some shamans keep hives not for honey, but for prophecy. Let me drop a softer truth here. Shamanic wisdom doesn't always come with answers. Sometimes it just comes with better questions. One Ecuadorian elder said, the problem with your people is you ask too fast. The forest hasn't finished listening. So maybe the first ritual isn't about incense or trances. Maybe it's just pausing, sitting by a plant and saying, who are you? Sitting with your own pain and saying, what do you need? And yeah, it sounds simple, but simple isn't the same as easy. The path of the shaman is not a shortcut. It's a spiral. You'll pass the same lessons over and over, each time seeing deeper. I knew a woman who once flew to Peru for a plant ceremony. She fasted, followed the rules, sang the songs. But after hours, nothing. No visions, no purging, no transformation. She felt like a fraud. But when she returned home, she found herself weeping in grocery stores, hugging strangers, writing poems in her sleep. She told me, it didn't happen there. It happened after, like something inside me had been rearranged and was still humming. That's the thing about shamanic wisdom. It doesn't shout, it hums, and it waits for you to notice. The fire's low now, but not out. Just enough glow to light this last stretch of the journey. And what a journey it's been. From the sky-splitter drums of the Arctic to the vine-draped chants of the Amazon. But now let's zoom in even closer. to the most intimate space of all, the self. Because at the end of the path, every shaman returns home. And home isn't a hut or a mountain. It's the body, the breath, the heartbeat, the quiet center we forget exists until silence brings it back. One of the most overlooked aspects of shamanic tradition, the body is a map. Shamans believe sickness isn't just physical, it's emotional, spiritual, social. A headache could mean grief. A back pain might trace to betrayal. Healing requires more than herbs. It requires story. There's a saying, the wound tells the tale. And many shamanic healers begin not by diagnosing symptoms, but by listening, really listening. Sometimes to your voice, sometimes to your dreams. Sometimes to the way you describe the ache. Take soul retrieval, for example, a core concept in many traditions. The idea that when we experience deep trauma, loss, abuse, fear, parts of our soul can leave to protect us. They don't vanish, they just hide. And the role of the shaman is to journey into the spirit world, find those fragments, and gently coax them back. It's not metaphor to them, it's mission. Some describe it like calling home a child who ran into the woods and got lost. You don't yell, you whisper, you wait. And when those soul pieces return, people often report feeling fuller, heavier in a good way, like they've been missing their own gravity. But here's a modern twist. Some therapists now integrate soul retrieval techniques into trauma counseling. Different vocabulary maybe, same essence. Which raises the question, have we been circling back to old wisdom all along? Let's talk about breath now. In shamanic traditions, breath isn't just oxygen. It's spirit. In Hawaiian huna, it's called ha, life force. In Andean mysticism, the breath connects you to Pachamama, the Earth Mother. To breathe deeply is to participate in life, not just endure it. Have you ever watched a shaman breathe before ceremony? Slow, measured, humming like wind through leaves. They don't rush. They let the world come to them. And then there's sound. We touched on Icaros before, but it goes beyond singing. In many cultures, rattles, flutes, bells, and even silence are tools for tuning the spirit. Not tuning out, tuning in. One Mazatec healer once said, "If the sound is true, the sickness cannot stay." She wasn't being poetic, she meant it. And yes, modern sound healers use gongs, bowls, binaural beats. But remember, the oldest instrument is the voice, a sigh, a hum, a name whispered to the wind. Some rituals even involve laughter. Imagine that, a healing ceremony where everyone's job is to belly laugh until they cry. To shake off grief like dust, to remind the body what joy feels like in the marrow. Because that's another forgotten shamanic truth. Joy heals too. You don't always need to bleed to transform. Sometimes you just need to dance in the rain until your tears taste sweet. Let me drop one more curious thread. In Mongolian tradition, shamans often wear mirrored garments, not for fashion, but to confuse evil spirits. The idea is that reflections disorient negativity. Ironic, right? In a world obsessed with reflections, they saw mirrors as defense. Think on that. Now, this may sound out there, but some researchers are beginning to explore whether shamanic trance states are related to quantum entanglement, that the visions might be entangled consciousness across dimensions. Fringe? Maybe. But even Einstein called quantum physics spooky action at a distance. So who's to say? Still, the real power of these traditions isn't in the spectacle, it's in the return. A true shaman doesn't vanish into the clouds. They come back to cook rice, to listen to a grieving friend, to hold a child's fevered hand and whisper, "You'll be okay." Because the greatest wisdom isn't hidden in firelit chants or dream tunnels. It's in how you walk through the world afterward, how you stir soup with intention, how you say someone's name with your whole spirit, how you notice the crow outside your window and say, "I see you." That's the final teaching. Shamanic wisdom isn't separate from life. It is life, looked at differently, lived with reverence, embodied with wonder. And as our night together fades like smoke into sky, I want you to remember this. You don't need a drum, you don't need feathers, You don't need the jungle. You only need to notice. That's where the magic begins. So now the drums have faded. There's no more singing, no more firelight flickering across painted faces. Just the slow hum of night, the kind that doesn't need to say anything at all. Let it wash over you. All those stories, from the icy breath of Arctic shamans to the echoing chants in cave walls and moonlit deserts, they can rest now, like ashes cooling after sacred flame. You don't need to carry them. You only need to remember how they made you feel. A little smaller, perhaps, but also more connected. Feel your body now, the way a shaman might, a sacred vessel, still and breathing. There's nothing to fix, nothing to find, no visions to chase, only your breath, and the soft weight of your body sinking into sleep, like a stone settling in a silent stream. Let your shoulders soften, let your thoughts drift, like feathers caught in a breeze. Even the earth sleeps, you know. Even the stars blink slower. So if your dreams bring spirits tonight, let them come. If they don't, let the quiet be enough. You've already walked far, through symbols and ceremonies, through forgotten names and remembered songs, and now, nothing more is required. You are exactly where you need to be, safe, whole, held. The journey is done for tonight, dreamer. Let go, sleep,